It wasn't the first time people had written him off. From the moment Adam stepped into the world, he had been the odd one out. While others followed the neat lines of expectation, he zigzagged through life, disregarding the conventional rules as if they were fences meant to be jumped. Teachers sighed when he doodled in the margins instead of taking notes. Family dinners were punctuated with quiet criticisms, the kind that gnawed at his confidence, like termites on old wood. "You'll never make it," they said, and for a long while, he believed them. He flunked classes he had no interest in, jobs he had no patience for. Friends drifted away, claiming he was too reckless, too different, too unwilling to play the game. The town he grew up in had a name for people like him: black sheep. Adam wore the label like a scarlet letter for years, carrying it in silence, not because he accepted it, but because he hadn't yet discovered the way to transform it into fuel. For a while, the weight of everyone else's doubt was suffocating. Nights were the worst. Lying awake on the creaking mattress in his cramped apartment, he would replay every insult, every dismissal, every laugh that wasn't his own. And yet, amidst the self-doubt, there was a quiet, stubborn pulse that refused to be extinguished. A flicker of curiosity, of stubbornness, of knowing that there was more to him than anyone else could see. The turning point was subtle. It didn't come with a lightning strike or a grand epiphany. He started small, tinkering with things that interested him, experimenting late into the night while the world slept. A little coding here, a sketch there, writing lines that only he understood at first. The projects were messy, incomplete, and laughable to anyone else, but they were his. And in those small moments, he found a rhythm, a purpose that no one had thought he could sustain. Opportunity came disguised as failure. One of his early projects, a poorly executed app idea, was laughed at when he first shared it. Investors passed, friends mocked, family shook their heads. Yet, instead of breaking, Adam observed, adjusted, and tried again. He listened to the criticism, but not the discouragement. Each no was a lesson, each rejection a blueprint for improvement. He refused to mimic success. He refused to walk the path everyone had laid out for him. He would carve his own. Months turned into years. Sleepless nights became routine, the kind of obsessive work that separates those who succeed from those who merely exist. He made mistakes that would have crushed anyone else, losing money, burning bridges, failing spectacularly in public. But Adam learned to survive the aftermath. Failure became familiar, almost comforting, because each time he stumbled, he rose with something new: insight, strategy, resilience. Then, one day, what had seemed impossible began to manifest. The projects he had nurtured quietly, the skills honed in solitude, started to catch attention. Investors who had dismissed him earlier returned with interest. Colleagues who had doubted him now sought his guidance. The same town that had labeled him a failure whispered his name in awe. Recognition wasn't immediate, and it wasn't unanimous, but it was undeniable. Adam never sought revenge. He didn't parade his success or gloat over those who had doubted him. Instead, he let the results speak for themselves: the products he created, the lives he influenced, the innovations he introduced. It was a quiet victory, measured not in applause but in impact. The black sheep had become a shepherd of his own destiny, proving not just to the world, but to himself, that unconventional paths could lead to extraordinary places. In the end, Adam understood something fundamental. The labels others place on us are only as heavy as we allow them to be. The black sheep, the outcast, the failure, these were not shackles. They were the raw materials for something greater. The world had written him off, and he had taken that doubt, that scorn, and turned it into fuel. The boy who never fit in had not only found his place, but had reshaped the definition of success itself. And though he rarely spoke of the journey, he carried the lessons in every confident step, every bold decision, and every quiet, unstoppable act of creation that reminded the world that being different was never a flaw. It was his secret weapon. He often thought about the moments when people had laughed at him, when they had whispered behind his back about what a lost cause he was. At first, those memories stung like fire, but over time, they became fuel, a reminder of how far he had come. Every smirk, Every raised eyebrow, every "you can't do that" became part of a mental ledger he carried, proof that doubt was never truth, only opinion. There was one particularly vivid memory he could never shake: the career fair in his small town, where his classmates flaunted their internships and neatly polished resumes. Adam had shown up with a barely functional prototype of an idea no one else understood. People laughed outright. Teachers muttered under their breath. Even some of his friends turned away in disbelief. But he had smiled back, not with arrogance, but with quiet conviction. He knew that what they saw as failure was just the beginning, and that their mockery would one day feel hollow. Years later, when the same people walked past him on the street, their expressions changed. Some tried to hide their astonishment, others avoided his gaze entirely. Adam didn't gloat. He barely acknowledged them. Success had not come from proving them wrong, it had come from proving himself right. He had discovered that the sweetest victories are not those that humiliate others, but those that elevate oneself. As his reputation grew, Adam began to mentor others who felt out of place, who had been labeled impossible or misfits by a world that prized conformity. He shared no magic formula, no guaranteed steps to success, only the story of persistence, self-belief, and relentless experimentation. He told them that the black sheep is not cursed, the black sheep is free. Free to carve a path untethered by expectation, free to fail and learn, free to rise in a way that is entirely one's own. The people who had doubted him remained a distant murmur in the background of his life. He had learned to let go of the need for validation from the world. What mattered was the impact he created, the innovations he birthed from ideas others had scoffed at, and the lives he touched simply by daring to be himself. Even as his ventures flourished, Adam remained humble. He lived simply, surrounded by a small circle of people who understood the fire it takes to turn doubt into drive. The mansion, the accolades, the awards, they were symbols, not destinations. His real triumph was internal, the unshakable belief that being different was not a weakness, but a strength that could weather storms and transform obstacles into opportunities. In the quiet moments, when he looked back at the path he had taken, Adam understood that the world would always have naysayers. But he also knew that those who listen to the whispers of doubt will never achieve greatness. The black sheep does not conform. The black sheep does not beg for approval. The black sheep takes the unseen, the ridiculed, the underestimated, and fashions it into something extraordinary. And so Adam walked forward, not as a trophy of defiance, but as proof of possibility. Every venture, every creation, every success was a chapter in the story of someone who refused to be defined by others, a story that would inspire generations to come. The black sheep had not only survived, he had thrived, and in doing so, had rewritten what it meant to be successful, proving that sometimes being the outcast is exactly what the world needs. The journey wasn't linear. For every small victory, there were setbacks that could have crushed a lesser spirit. Investors withdrew support at the last moment, projects that had seemed promising failed spectacularly, and at times even Adam doubted himself. There were nights he lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if perhaps everyone else had been right all along. But then he remembered the early days, when he had begun tinkering in solitude simply because it excited him, because it made him feel alive. That spark, however small, refused to be snuffed out. He became a master of adaptation. What others saw as chaos, he saw as opportunity. A failed app wasn't the end. It was a lesson in user experience. A collapsed partnership wasn't a betrayal. It was a lesson in trust and timing. Every misstep became a stepping stone, a fragment of a larger mosaic that no one else could see yet. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the pieces began to fit together. Adam's life became a study in resilience and patience. He learned to listen without absorbing negativity, to evaluate criticism without letting it erode his confidence. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him intellectually, not socially, who debated ideas instead of judging personality. He discovered that mentorship was invaluable, not in the form of handouts, but guidance that allowed him to navigate the labyrinth of business, technology, and human relationships. It was during this period that Adam realized another truth. Success was not just about wealth or recognition. True success was about mastery over oneself, about learning to trust one's own instincts when everyone else doubted. It was about creating something so authentic that it couldn't be ignored, no matter how loud the skeptics' voices were. It was about turning the label of black sheep into a badge of ingenuity, originality, and courage. Years later, when he finally launched the project that would cement his reputation, the world noticed. A product born from countless sleepless nights, failures, and quiet persistence finally reached its audience, and the reaction was electric. Investors clamored for a piece, competitors took notice, and the people who had once mocked him were forced to reckon with the magnitude of his vision. He didn't rub it in their faces. He didn't have to. His success was the loudest statement of all. Adam used his influence wisely. He established initiatives to support those overlooked or underestimated, creating platforms where unconventional thinkers could thrive. He understood intimately what it meant to be dismissed, to be laughed at, to be told one doesn't belong. His empathy was grounded in experience, not theory, and that made him both formidable and approachable. The lessons he had learned, the ones drilled into him by failure, by doubt, by the scorn of others, became the foundation for his philosophy. That greatness does not come from conformity, but from courage. That innovation is born not from safety, but from risk. That the black sheep does not need approval to succeed. The black sheep needs persistence, vision, and unwavering belief in the worth of their own ideas. Even as his reputation grew, Adam remained grounded. Luxury and fame were never the goal. They were merely byproducts of a life lived authentically. He cherished quiet mornings spent working on new ideas, evenings spent with people who understood him, and the occasional moment of solitude, where he could reflect on the improbable journey from outcast to visionary. He often smiled when he thought of the small town where it all began. The whispers, the judgment, the smirks, they were all part of the story, but they no longer held power. They had been catalysts, not barriers. Every doubter, every critic, every so-called friend who had turned away had unwittingly contributed to his rise. Without them, perhaps he would never have discovered the depth of his own determination. Adam's story became legend, not for the wealth he accumulated or the accolades he received, but for the message it carried, that being different is not a flaw, that failure is not the end, and that true success comes to those who dare to pursue it relentlessly, without apology, without fear. He had taken the world's doubt and transformed it into triumph, creating a life that was wholly, unapologetically his own. In the end, the black sheep was no longer defined by the judgments of others. He had rewritten his own narrative, proving that the outcast, the underestimated, the unconventional thinker could not only survive but thrive, and in doing so, inspire a generation to embrace their uniqueness, pursue their passions, and find strength in the very qualities that others had once scorned.